Right, so it's 5:32 and we'll begin as more people join in the call. So I'm Sankalp on behalf of PMSCIF World. I take care of business development at PMSCIF World. And for our regular viewers, you might have known, you might see a familiar face in me. And to all those who are joining us for the first time, welcome to our Invest Sense webinar series, where we talk with a lot of intuitive fund managers, industry leaders, to get their perspective on the markets and understand how they're investing, how they're looking at the market. So in that tradition, PMSCIF World gets Dhaval Kapadia from Morningstar to talk about their philosophy, how they are looking at the markets, and how essentially they invest. So Morningstar is a leading provider of independent investment research. As you all know, they are spread across 5 continents: the Americas, Europe, Australia, and Asia. The company offers an extensive line of products and services for individual investors, financial advisors, asset managers, and all kinds of institutional investors. Morningstar is known across the world for their investment acumen and tracking a lot of publicly listed companies, private markets, debt securities, and altogether real-time global market. Morningstar manages around close to $233 billion in asset under advisory or management as on December 31st, 2019. The company operates around 27 countries. That's about Morningstar, which tells us how robust they are and how they have expertise in looking at asset classes across the world. And Dhaval Kapadia, representing Morningstar today, is a CFA, CFP. He works in the capacity of director and portfolio specialist at Morningstar Investment Advisors India. He's an industry veteran, has close to 25 years of experience in the financial services. He's a postgraduate in management and a CFA and a CFP, as I said earlier. Prior to Morningstar, he was with marquee organizations like Access Private Wealth and Wealth and Private Banking and ICICI Financial Planning Desk, among other notable names. So welcome, Dhaval, and we are excited to hear from you on your approach on how you are looking at the markets and the overall Morningstar mantra for markets. So let me give you a little bit of context before we set in. We just ran a poll, Nifty at 20,000 by Diwali, and 53% say yes. And no need I say more about the bull run that we are in. And rightly so, a lot has worked for India, a lot is still under work in progress. And, we are certainly amidst extraordinary times as investors. So that raises a lot of questions and a lot of answers need to be given. So with that context, I hand over to you, Dhaval, to introduce the topic, to introduce the discussion, and in general, talk about how you feel about markets and your ideas. So to the audience, we'll keep doing polls. Please keep asking questions, as many as you can on the chat. We'll try to get most of them answered. Over to you, Dhaval.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Sankalp, for the kind introduction, and good evening to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Today, essentially, what we're going to talk about, and Sankalp, touched a nerve on that, which is, where are markets expected to be by Diwali. I think, obviously, we've seen pretty strong performance from markets, particularly over the last, 12 to 18 months since the lows of, March of last year, and probably a lot of investors are thinking that, what should they do? Should they continue to stay invested? Should they exit the market? Should they book profits? And if at all they book profits or decide to exit the markets, what should they do with the money? Should they invest into debt, gold, or a mix of asset classes, right? And that's what we'll try and talk a little bit about today, about a single asset investing. How does the risk and reward pan out if you're investing into just individual asset classes versus a multi-asset kind of an approach. So that's what we'll try and talk about today. And like Sankalp said, feel free to post your questions in the chat box. We'll try and address them later in the session as such. So I've got a brief presentation, so I'll just share my screen, and maybe Sankalp can confirm that it's visible. Just give me a moment.
Sure, please pull it up. Yeah. Yes, it is visible to me. Members in the chat, can you please give us a thumbs up that it's visible so that Dhaval can proceed?
So are we good to go?
Yeah, we're good to go. I think people will keep commenting in the chat as we go.
Okay. So, just a quick, Sankalp gave a brief sort of overview on Morningstar as such. Just a quick, a little bit of more color to Morningstar and especially our mission. So Morningstar was set up in 1984 initially with the objective or with the purpose of providing, data and research on mutual funds for end investors. And the company was set up in Chicago in the US. Currently, we're listed on the NASDAQ stock exchange as well. And, currently we're present in about 29 countries, providing data on over 600,000 investment products. And, we've become a trusted name in independent investment research over a period of time. And our mission has always been to empower investor success. So what this means essentially is to create great financial products that help investors meet their financial goals. So that's the sort of mission of Morningstar. Currently, we employ about 8,000 plus people across 29 countries, including about 3,000 employees in India itself as such. Just quickly talking a little bit about the team that I am part of globally. Me and my colleagues out here in India, we are part of the investment management group locally, or globally rather, I would say. So this team is the investment management group within Morningstar is responsible for providing investment advisory and portfolio management solutions to end investors. And typically, these are provided, by partnering with advisors or with platforms such as, PMS AI World out here. And typically, as of date, we sort of provide portfolio management services in the US, UK, Australia, South Africa, and India. And this team consists of about 550 plus employees, out of which about 95 odd are investment professionals. So essentially, these are people whose day-to-day job is to track markets, build views on asset classes, manage money, review portfolios, and so on and so forth. So fairly, strong team that's built to support this, business sort of globally as such. And sitting out here in India, how do we leverage our global resources? So जैसे हमने कहा, हमारी global team काफी बड़ी है, लेकिन in India, how do we really leverage the research and the capabilities that we built globally, right? So the group, the investment management group, is sort of structured in 3 regions: Americas, EMEA, and Asia Pacific. Now, within each of the 3 regions, we have a center of excellence or a hub, or a large, a location where a large investment team is placed, and all the countries in that region work closely, with that investment team in that particular hub to build solutions for the local market. So, for example, for Asia Pacific, we have a large investment team in Sydney, in Australia, and in India, we work closely with, the Australian investment team to build solutions for the local market. So that way, we are able to combine our local investment management expertise with our global resources to deliver long-term investment results to clients and end investors worldwide as such. Just moving on very quickly is that so what is it that drives our investment philosophy and our thinking across the investment group, right? I'm sure many of you as investors will be interacting with a lot of asset managers. You would have seen a lot of webinars probably on PMS AIF and elsewhere as well, right? And each investment manager will talk of the investment process that they follow, how they pick stocks, how they construct portfolios, right? We think the key driver of an investment business is the philosophy that they have, right? So how do they make investment decisions? What is it that drives their thinking? In our case, we've identified a set of 7 key investment principles, which, like I said earlier, drive our thinking, behavior, and decision-making on the investment side. And these principles are essentially observations of successful investors over the last several decades, the likes of Warren Buffett, Peter Lynch. We've observed them following some of these principles in their businesses over a period of time, and derive success and wealth for their investors as well. The first principle is we put investors first, right? So we believe that firms that put investors first win over the long term, because these investors would tend to also win over the long term. And putting investors first is like the foundation of Morningstar as a company as a whole, in fact. The next principle is that we are independent minded. So we believe that to be able to generate performance that's superior to markets, you have to think differently. If you think with the markets, if you buy when everyone else is buying and sell when everyone else is selling, your performance will largely be market linked, right? So we believe to generate superior performance, you need to think differently. And at times we may have a contrarian view to markets. So as long as it's backed by research, we are comfortable taking a contrarian position relative to markets as well. Next is we are long-term investors. So we believe that by being a long-term investor, you are able to ride through the various market cycles and identify opportunities at low points in the market cycle as such, like the one we saw in March, April of last year, right? So if you're a long-term investor, you're thinking of opportunities. If you're a short-term investor, you're thinking of, where do I get my liquidity out, right? So from our point of view, we are sort of clearly, long-term investors as such. Next is we are valuation-driven investors. So we believe that the price that you pay for the value of a security or an asset class is a key driver of performance that you'll generate from that investment over the long term, right? So we believe that valuations play an important role in terms of driving performance from investments over the long term, both in terms of risk and return. And therefore valuations form a key component of our investment process, right? The next one is we take a fundamental approach. So what this essentially means is that our analysts spend more time in trying to understand cash flow drivers for different asset classes and underlying fundamentals of each asset class, vis-a-vis technical analysis. So we don't really spend too much time on technical analysis as such. Next is we strive to minimize costs, right? So we believe that high costs impact investor returns over the long term, and our goal is to try and minimize costs for investors and help them keep more of the wealth that is sort of generated through investments and help them enjoy the benefits of compounding as well. Finally, we build portfolios holistically. So what this essentially means is that we try and construct portfolios which include asset classes and securities which will, in our view, react differently to different economic scenarios. So we believe that portfolio construction is not just about adding more stocks or more funds or more securities to our portfolios, but adding securities or asset classes that will react differently in different sort of economic scenarios as such. That's what we strive to do when we are building portfolios as such. So just quickly looking at what are the areas that Morningstar Investment has sort of tried to focus on in terms of building skill sets and capabilities, right? So one of the key drivers of investment performance, and this has been shown by studies over several decades, is that asset allocation is the key driver of investment performance over the long term. In other words, if you were to look at long-term investment performance, it's not security selection or market timing that drives that performance. It's the decision on how much to invest in each asset class. In other words, it's asset allocation that is the key driver of long-term investment performance. So that's where we've spent a fair bit of time in terms of trying to build asset allocation solutions or asset allocation models for clients and investors to help them achieve their long-term goals as such. So that's one key area of focus for us in terms of building multi-asset or asset allocation kind of solutions. The second is manager selection, which is nothing but mutual fund research. So again, that's an area where Morningstar has been involved in for several decades. And again, we try and build forward-looking views on mutual funds and mutual fund managers, in terms of how they are expected to perform in the future relative to what they've done in the past per se. And we combine our asset allocation as well as manager selection to construct portfolios for clients. So just changing track a bit and talking a little bit about what's been happening in markets, and we are all sort of in a way witness to that. But just looking at the last about 12 to 18 months or so, and just pulling back the chart to about early 2020, so Jan 2020. Here essentially what we are looking at is how different asset classes have performed across this time period, right? From about Jan 2019 till the current period as such. And here we're looking at three equity markets. So one is essentially we're looking at at Indian equities as such, which is the red line that you see out here, which is the BSE 500 index. Next, we're looking at the US equities as such, which is the blue bold line, which is the S&P 500, and then global equities, which is represented by MSCI All Country World Index. So this is the yellow line that you see out here. Alongside that, we are also looking at how gold and fixed income have performed during this time period, right? And for comparison purposes, all of these have been rebased to 100. तो इसका ये मतलब है कि आपने 100 रुपीज 100 रुपए इन्वेस्ट किए होते ये सब एसेट क्लासेस में, तो पिछले 12 से 18 महीने में इसका परफॉर्मेंस कैसे दिखता था. So that is what we are trying to show out here. So obviously, as we know, in March, April 2020, at the onset of the pandemic, equity markets underwent a sharp correction. So you're seeing Indian equities were down by about 37 to 40% or so. So were US equities as well as global equities as a whole underwent a correction. Although the fall was a little bit lesser than what you saw in Indian equities, which, like I said, is a red line that you on the graph that you see out here, and US and global equities are the blue and the yellow line that you see out here. So all equity markets, all major equity markets, probably barring China at that point of time, underwent a sharp correction at the onset of the pandemic. On the other hand, as you can see, gold as an asset class, which is the green line, was performing steadily. In fact, it moved up during the early period of the pandemic, and that is on account of risk aversion, and people were concerned about what the impact would be. And gold tends to do well, during periods of significant uncertainty around the economy or around the markets. And that's what actually happened at that point of time. Gold, did fairly well and actually generated a positive, performance during that time period. And, the gray line that you see in between is the fixed income. So is Indian debt as such. And that was relatively steady during this period. It sort of acted as a cushion, to investor portfolios as such. Obviously, since then, we've seen a fairly sharp turnaround, since maybe about the later part of 2020. Markets recovered their losses by about, Indian equities recovered their losses by about, October, November of last year. Global equities recovered their losses a bit earlier than that. And since then, obviously, we've seen, nothing short of a roaring sort of a bull run. Equity markets have performed fairly strongly across the world, and more so Indian equities in more recent times, particularly since over the last couple of quarters, have sort of started to outperform, global equity markets as such, right? But essentially, that's the picture that you're seeing, of different asset classes over the last about 12 to 18 months. So, the question that's on top of most people's minds is that, what next? And just to look at what a lot of global experts are thinking of, and these are just some sort of quotes or just some broader views that have been put out by some, very large investors or people who are leading very large, investment firms, across the world as such. And we see that generally the indication is that people are probably have turned a little bit cautious. Investors have turned a little bit cautious on the back of the strong rally that we've seen in markets. A lot of large investors and investment firms believe that valuations have moved up quite sharply, and along with that, there are concerns around inflation, as we are seeing. Commodity prices also move up. Crude oil prices have moved up quite sharply over the last, particularly over the last few quarters, and there are concerns around higher inflation resulting in central banks taking action to curb inflation and so on and so forth. So in a sense, I think the sort of there is a word of caution that's been put out by a lot of investors worldwide as such, or large investment managers as such. So what should you as an investor be doing? And typically, a lot of investors we've seen that tend to invest into asset classes that they're comfortable with, right? I mean, they tend to stick to investments into, if say somebody has been traditionally or historically been investing into stocks, they continue to stick to that. If somebody's been putting more money into debt investments or real estate, if they're comfortable with, that's what they tend to stick to. And at times, because they tend to try and operate within that comfort zone, they might at times forget or ignore risks associated with those kind of asset classes, right? So what we'll see in the subsequent slides is try and look at a longer term picture. What we saw earlier was a shorter term picture of how different asset classes have performed. In the subsequent slides, we'll try and look at a slightly longer term picture to see how different asset classes have performed across the last 10-15 years, and what does it really mean for us from that point of view. So just very quickly, before I pull up some numbers, we had a poll question for all of you. Sankalp, can we pull up that first poll question? Essentially,
I think around the poll is live. The poll is live.
Okay, so the question is around if you can share your thoughts around what do you think the various asset classes that we are talking of, which is Indian equities, global equities, fixed income, and gold. What are the kind of real returns that they've generated over the last 15 years, right? So what real returns essentially means is after inflation, what are the real returns that these asset classes have generated? So I don't know if, I think probably people are throwing up. Okay. So I think people are, so people, I think, are throwing up numbers in terms of which asset classes perform better versus the others is what I guess. But yeah, let's look at what this poll throws up. I think it appears to be that people believe that over the last 15 years, global equities have done fairly well. I think between global equities and Indian equities, the number is sort of almost evenly split, whereas people believe that gold and fixed income have sort of underperformed, right? So let's look at and I think people are probably close to what has actually happened in terms of how these asset classes have performed over the last about 15 years or so. So what we are seeing out here is the annualized real returns that have been generated from various asset classes, like I mentioned, global equities, Indian equities, gold, and fixed income. So Indian equities have over this 15-year period have generated the best performance as such, a real return of about 5% odd. Real return essentially, like I said, indicates the inflation adjusted return. And why do we look at real return? To make it comparable across different markets and asset classes, right? So if you were to compare this to global equities, global equities have also done fairly well, about a real return of about close to 4.5%. And both of these have outperformed gold and fixed income. Gold and fixed income have also generated real returns, but positive real returns, but these are lower than equity asset classes. So I think this is what largely the poll outcome also sort of indicated. Now, that's one side of the story in terms of how these asset classes are performed, right? And like they say, or like I'd like to say, is that picture abhi baki hai. So there is still much more to go, right? So one side is the performance or returns. The other side is the risks that one encounters while investing in these asset classes, right? So what we're looking out here, what we're seeing out here on this chart is essentially for Indian equities, what has been the drawdowns over the last about 20 odd years or so. Now, what does drawdown means? Drawdown means the downside risk. So, essentially drawdown indicates the peak to trough, or the highest level of the investment to the lowest level of the investment at that point of time. So what has been that, drawdown that we witnessed, or what are the maximum drawdowns that we witnessed over the last about 20 years or so from Indian equities, right? So out here, we've pointed out periods when Indian equities have seen corrections of more than 20% or so, right? So the drawdown or the maximum, the fall, from the peak to the lowest point in the investment has been in excess of 20%. There was 4 such periods over the last 20 years, and 2 of them, again, many of you who've been tracking markets or have been investing over the last 15, 20 years would recall these periods, right? One was the global financial crisis in 2008, 2009, when Indian equities corrected by about 64 odd %. Obviously, global markets also witnessed a sharp correction back then. And before that was the tech, bubble bust, in the sense that, there was a significant rally in IT stocks in the late 90s, 98, 99. And then we saw, a sharp correction in largely the IT-driven stocks, and then markets as a whole corrected by about, 58 odd %, back then. And in more recent times, last year, obviously, we, at the onset of the pandemic, Indian equities, corrected by about, 35 to 40% or so, right? So those are the periods when we've seen sharp corrections in markets. But the other important point to note is how long did it take for markets to recover? So if you invested 100 rupee at the peak of the market, how long did it take for you to recover these investments post these sharp corrections? So for instance, if you pick a period like 2008, 2009, it took about 86 months, right? So which is 7 years to really recover the investment that was made, say in around the peak of the market in early 2008, right? The Sensex or the Indian equity market peak was early 2008. So if you invested at that point of time 100 rupee, it took you about 7 years to really recover that initial 100 rupee invested in the Indian equity market as such, which is a pretty long recovery period, right? And similarly, even in 2000, 2001 as well, the recovery period was about 47 months or so. That's about close to 4 years. Obviously, last year we've seen a sharper recovery when markets recovered 37% kind of cut or the drawdown in a period of about 7-8 months or so. But again, we've seen periods when, particularly when the corrections have been sharp, the recovery period has been pretty long. So how is this significant? It's because if you as an investor had a goal where you said that I need money for a particular objective or a particular goal, to buy a property or for a child's education or whatever it is, and if you had a 6-7 year horizon in mind, you might have just barely recovered your capital, if you had invested, say, in a 2008, 2009 kind of a period, particularly in early 2008 as such. So that's where, the drawdown or period or the downside risk is sort of important in that sense. Now, if you were to compare this across different asset classes, the ones that we saw earlier, जैसे हमने 2 स्लाइड पहले देखा कि global equities का, gold का और Indian debt का performance कैसे था. So if we compare now the drawdowns or the downside risk that we've seen in these asset classes across the 4 periods that we saw in the previous slide. Out here again, Indian equities is marked in the dark blue kind of shade. International equities in the gray shade that you see out here, the gray bars that you see. Gold in the yellow bars, and fixed income or Indian debt is marked in the green bars as such. So as you can see out here that other asset classes, including global equities, have seen shorter or smaller drawdowns, right? The drawdowns haven't been as sharp as in the case of Indian equities as such. So although Indian equities have performed very well, which we saw a couple of slides ago, but so has the drawdown or the downside risk has also been higher in the case of Indian equities over the last about 20 years or so. Now, why are drawdowns important? Why are we talking of risk, right? Why are we talking of the downside in markets as such, right? The reason is because typically, when there is a drawdown, if you made an investment of, say, if you have invested 100 rupees into the market, and if that investment were to correct by 20% or come down to about 80 rupees, how much would you need to recover back your principal? Sankalp, can we pull out the second question that we had around
the poll is live again with options.
Okay. So again, the question is that if your portfolio value falls by 20% from 100 rupees to 80 rupees, what is the kind of return that you need? And obviously 100%, as correctly answered that, is you need a 25%. Oh, I think there is a change in the responses, but so largely I think a bulk of the people have responded that you need a 25% return to recover back your principal, right? And what if your investment were to fall by 60%, which is what we saw in the global financial crisis, right?
Let's just get the poll live.
Yeah, if you can get that one live as well. If your investment were to fall by 60%, as you saw in 2008, what is the return that you would need to recover your original investment that you made? So 100 rupee comes down to 40 rupees, right? So what is the return that you would need to generate? Sankalp, would you be able to pull that up?
Yes, I'm
I think there's another one that's come up, yeah.
Yeah, so that's just coming up.
Yeah. It's still the older poll.
It's just come up. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's gotten.
Yeah. So if your portfolio were to fall by 60%, which is like what we saw out there, how much return would you need to So I'll just maybe pull up the numbers out here on my slide as well. So essentially, I think what you would need as an investor, if your investment falls by 60%, which is like what we saw in 2008 as well, you would need a 150% return to recover, your original investment or the money that you invested, at the peak of the market, or that was invested at the peak of the market as such. So in other words, typically, the returns that you need to recover your original principal tends to be much higher than the fall that you witness or the drawdown that you witness in your investment, right? So therefore, it's essential to keep in mind, both the upside as well as the downside, right? That how do I reduce, risk in my investments? Because, if my investments were to fall quite significantly, I will need substantial returns, and therefore the recovery periods, and which is what we witnessed in after 2008, 2009, was that you needed about 7 years to recover back your original investments, because needed a 150% return, which would tend to come generally over a period of time, right? So therefore, it's important to keep that in mind as well. So how do you really optimize risk and return? How do you generate, try and generate better returns, keeping in mind the downside risk element as well? So one of the ways of doing it is by investing in a mix of different asset classes, right? Or combining different asset classes in your portfolio, so which we refer to as multi-asset investing. So rather than investing in a single asset class, you could look at a mix of asset classes which would essentially react differently to different economic scenarios. Right now, we are more familiar with Indian equities, right, as investors, and obviously Indian equities provide us exposure to Indian economic growth drivers, whether it's large, mid, and small, largely driven by how the Indian economy is performing, right? But if you had a scenario which is what we had from time to time in 2008, 2009, or even prior to that, when the Indian economy is not doing so well, most Indian equity categories, whether it's large, mid, or small, would tend to see sharp falls or corrections. We witnessed some of it in 2018, 19, and so on and so forth, right? But if you look at other asset classes such as global equities, in that sense, they tend to provide a larger opportunity set. Obviously, these markets would tend to move based on their respective growth drivers in those markets or for those stocks or those companies as such, right? I mean, it's not necessary if Indian equities see a correction that global markets would also tend to necessarily correct, right? They would be driven by their respective growth as such, right? They also provide you foreign currency exposure, which provides a hedge against the depreciation of the rupee as such. If you look at asset classes such as gold, obviously they provide an inflation hedge, and also at times a hedge against significant market volatility or economic uncertainty, which we saw even partially last year as well. So that's where gold would react differently to different scenarios, as we saw in one of the previous slides. Similarly, if you look at fixed income, again, it provides a relatively secure cash flow stream. Therefore, again, sort of providing sort of a safety net or a cushion in times of when there is significant market volatility. Cash, again, would tend to benefit from rising interest rates. So essentially, these asset classes would react differently in different sort of market scenarios as such. So that's what multi-asset investing is about, combining different asset classes which would react differently in different sort of scenarios. And we've spoken a little bit about international equities even in the earlier slides. So why do you really need to look at international equities as part of your portfolios? And obviously, we've seen that Indian equities have done fairly well over the last 10, 15 years or so. But despite that, India still comprises a small portion of the global, capital markets as such. Now, here we're looking at the share of various major markets in the global, market index, such as an MSCI All Country World kind of an index, right, which is like a representation of global equity markets, right? Out here we see India comprises less than about 2% of global markets. US obviously comprises the largest share, and there are several other markets, which comprise meaningful shares which are larger than India. So in other words, there is a large opportunity set out there. We know that the Googles, the Facebooks, not just those companies which are listed in the US, but many other multinationals which are listed, in various markets, which comprise, a fairly large share of the global markets as such. And so therefore, there is a large opportunity set out there. The second reason is obviously, even if you look at it in terms of GDP, again, India is still comprising about 3% of global GDP. We know US is the largest economy. Similarly, China is the second largest economy, and so on. So again, in terms of GDP share as well, or economic share, India's, although it's growing, but it's still a small part of the overall pie, of the global economy. So in other words, there are a large number of opportunities out there, and that's one of the reasons why one should look at international equities as such. And just looking at also in terms of why do you need to invest in these many asset classes, right? Do you really need to invest into debt or international equities and different markets as such, right? So here what we are looking at is in terms of how different asset classes have performed over the last about 12 odd years or so, starting from 2008. And what we've done out here is we are looking at the calendar year-wise performance of each asset class. So in the asset classes or markets that we are looking at include US equities, developed market equities, Indian equities, European equities, Indian debt, and emerging markets. So these are the asset classes that we are looking at. And like I said, these are the calendar year-wise performance, and all of these returns are converted into rupee returns. So in other words, if you are an Indian investor, what was the kind of returns that you would have generated by investing in these asset classes? So again, this is a busy slide, so I don't want you to look at the numbers for each of the years. What we've done to keep it simple is that for each calendar year, the asset class that has performed the best is marked in a dark green shade, and the worst performing asset class is marked in a dark pink or red kind of a shade, right? So if you look at 2008, Indian equities was like the worst performing asset class among these, and was down about, like we saw, about 55-60%. On the other hand, fixed income was among the better performing asset classes, which was up about 25%. Similarly, if you look at across these years, you'll notice that it's very difficult to pick the winners and losers on a year-on-year. So what it means is that asset classes that have not done well in a particular year tend to do well in subsequent years, and vice versa, right? When a certain asset class is done very well, or a market is done very well in a certain year, the subsequent year it might sort of underperform as such, right? So that's one trend that you can observe. The other important, interesting point out here to note is that periods when Indian equities have not done very well, right, such as a period like 2013, or 2019, when Indian equities sort of underperformed or didn't generate, or generated low returns as such, other markets or other asset classes have done well during those periods. So again, if you look at 2019, Indian equities were up by about 9%. But if you look at global markets, you look at US equities or developed markets, or in fact even European or emerging market equities, all of them generated much better performance. And similarly, 2013 was a similar trend at that point of time. So in other words, there are periods when Indian equities might not do so well, but several other global markets have done well during those time periods as such. So in other words, we believe it pays to be diversified across various asset classes and markets. The other comparison that we've included out here is a multi-asset portfolio. So if you invested in a mix of these asset classes, say about 40% to Indian equity, about 10% to international, 45% to Indian debt, and 5% to gold. So like a 50-50 kind of a portfolio of equity, debt, and a bit in gold as well. So how would that have performed over this this entire time period? And the column that you see on the right hand side towards of this chart is the CAGR, or the annualized returns for each of the asset classes and the multi-asset portfolio as well. So as you can see, the multi-asset portfolio, which comprises a mix of these asset classes, has done fairly well during this time period, and the performance hasn't been as volatile as you would see in individual asset classes as such. So I think the message out here, or the key takeaway, is that it in a way pays to be diversified across these asset classes that we are talking of as such. So keeping some of this in mind, we've in India, we sort of offer a bunch of 4 multi-asset portfolios. As the name suggests, these are strategies or portfolios which invest across multiple asset classes, which includes Indian equity, fixed income, international equity, and gold. So these are the 4 asset classes that we are investing in, and these portfolios are offered on the PMS platform. So we hold a PMS license in India, and these portfolios are being have been offered or have been available for the last about slightly more than 2 years now. And as you can see out here is that there are 4 strategies, each suited for a different risk appetite and a different investment horizon. So based on your risk appetite and based on your investment time frame, one could look at any of these 4 portfolios as such, right? For instance, the balanced portfolio is suitable for a horizon of about 5 to 7 years, and for somebody with a moderate kind of a risk appetite. And as your investment horizon and risk appetite increases, the allocation to growth assets such as equity would tend to increase, right? Another aspect about these portfolios is that the asset allocation is actively managed, right? So what this means essentially is that we would tend to invest more in asset classes that are looking attractive at a point of time and lesser in asset classes that are not looking so attractive at a point of time. And why do we need to do that is essentially because we are trying to reduce the downside risk in the portfolios. And like we saw earlier, the importance of reducing drawdowns or downside risk is important to generate superior or better performance over the long term, right? Your recovery periods will tend to be shorter if your drawdown is lesser, is what we saw in the previous slide as well. So to try and reduce the downside risk, we will tend to invest lesser in asset classes that are, say, overvalued or not looking so attractive at a point of time, and more in asset classes that are looking attractive at a particular point of time. Right now, if I were to just pick the example of the growth portfolio out here, now what you see on the donut chart alongside the growth portfolio is these allocations are the strategic or neutral allocations. So about the growth portfolio will tend to invest about 54% in Indian equity, about 16% in international, and 30% in fixed income and cash. So it's like a 70-30 portfolio. Now, if we believe that each of these markets and asset classes are trading at fair valuation, so Indian equity, if they're trading at fair valuation, this is what we'll invest in Indian equity. Similarly, international and fixed income. But as we know, markets tend to be either, on many occasions tend to be either overvalued or undervalued, right? So therefore, the actual allocations will vary, and they will be actively managed within the ranges that are mentioned out here. So Indian equity will be the actual allocation will be in a range of 40 to 70%, fixed income in a range of 20 to 50, international in a range of 0 to 30, and gold in a range of 0 to 50. So depending on what our views on markets are, the actual allocations will vary based on those views, right? Another aspect about these portfolios is that the allocations are further split into different buckets. So Indian equity, there is separate allocation within that to large, mid, and small. Fixed income, the allocation is split across short-term, medium-term, long-term, and cash. And international equity, we are investing in 3 regions, which is US, Europe, and emerging markets. So these are the 3 regions that we are investing into in these portfolios as such. So, because each of these asset classes will tend to have different, risk and reward or behavior patterns, right? I mean, large, mid, and small will tend to react differently at different points of time. Similarly, these international markets will tend to react differently. So we have, separate allocations to each of these, asset classes or markets in these, portfolios as such. And the underlying allocations in these portfolios are going into mutual funds through the direct plan kind of route. So we are investing into mutual funds, which could include, actively managed or passively managed funds, through the direct plan route as such. So how will the allocations in these portfolios move across time periods, right? And which is what I was referring to in the previous slide as well. So typically when markets have disappointed, when equity markets have not generated very great returns and valuations are looking reasonable, like we saw a sharp correction in March, April of last year. During such periods, we will tend to reduce our allocations to cash and debt in the portfolio, and we will tend to add equity allocations back into the portfolios, and vice versa. When markets have generated very strong returns and valuations are looking stretched, we will tend to reduce our allocations to debt and cash, and increase allocations to we will tend to reduce allocations to equity and growth assets, and tend to increase allocations to cash and debt within the portfolio assets. So that's how the allocations will tend to move across time periods in these portfolios as such. And quickly looking at how this has played out in real time, in the sense that how have the allocations actually moved within the portfolios over a period of time. So here, as an illustration, we are looking at the aggressive portfolio, the active aggressive portfolio, and we're looking at how the Indian equity allocation within this portfolio has moved over the last about 2 years or so, right, since about April 2019 till the current period, and how is it placed at this point of time, right? So the way we are depicting this is in two ways. One is we are indicating here what is the normal or neutral allocation to large, mid, and small cap in the aggressive portfolio. So the orange dotted line indicates the normal or neutral allocation to large caps in the aggressive portfolio, which is at about 48%. So for large caps, you need to follow the right hand side y-axis out here. So the red dotted line indicates about 48% is a normal allocation to large caps in the aggressive portfolio. For mid and small caps, you need to look at the left hand side y-axis. So the mid cap is the yellow dotted line, and small caps is the green dotted line out here. So for mid caps, the normal allocation in the aggressive portfolio is at about 13%, and for small caps, it is at about 7% or so. And the bold lines indicate the actual allocations in the aggressive portfolio to large, mid, and small over the last 2 years and how they've moved. So if I were to just look at, just go back a bit to April 2019 when we launched these portfolios, we were underweight Indian equities by about 6 to 7%. So we felt valuations were looking a bit stretched. So you can see the bold lines were all below their respective dotted lines, right, at that point of time. Now come, March, April 2020, when we saw a sharp correction in markets, we felt that, Indian equities were looking, the valuations were looking much more reasonable and attractive. And we added, about 12 odd percent to Indian equities in the portfolio. So you see a sharp jump in the, allocations to Indian equities, not across large, mid, and small, during that period. Since then, we've been trimming a bit of exposure to Indian equities. We've done a little bit of rebalancing and profit booking from time to time. Currently, we are, around neutral levels for both large cap and small cap, whereas for mid caps, we are slightly underweight because we feel, Indian equities probably are not looking as attractive as they were earlier. They may be slightly expensive, so therefore we are slightly sort of underweight, particularly to the mid cap, segment out here. I'll maybe skip through the next couple of slides, which talk of how, in the interest of time, I was hoping to take more questions, so I'll just quickly skip through these, which talk of the allocation to, international equities and fixed income. Maybe we can come back to these during the Q&A. So all in all, just to sort of, wrap up at my end in that sense, at least from a presentation perspective, is that to try and summarize the proposition and our offering as such is that, we believe that these portfolios are like a start to end solution. So, as an investor, typically, you would probably be investing in multiple asset classes. So that's what we would tend to do, is build the asset allocation, identify the underlying securities or funds, construct the portfolio and monitor and review it from time to time. So it becomes like a start to end kind of solution. Obviously, there are options available to meet varying investor, varying needs that you might have in terms of risk appetite or your horizon as such. So, options, across balanced to aggressive plus. Secondly, through these strategies, you're able to gain, exposure to both our global as well as, local portfolio management expertise. We're diversifying these portfolios by investing into international markets as well. So that's, a broader views coming in from our global research teams as such is what we implement out here. And clearly the focus is on generating superior risk-adjusted performance. And then finally, lower costs, because the underlying investments are going into, direct plans or mutual funds. The management fees are fairly competitive. That's how we're trying to, maintain costs at a lower level. So, that's in a nutshell about the proposition as such that we are offering out here. And in terms of, just to quickly wrap up in terms of key takeaways from what we've seen today is that, obviously we've seen initially we saw that single asset investing can generate wealth, but, there is much higher risk and as we saw, the drawdowns can be quite sharp in certain asset classes. So that's what you have to be mindful of. The second is international equities provide exposure to varying growth drivers, and that can act as a good diversifier in your portfolios. Again, we saw some of that earlier. And multi-asset strategies, in a sense, help generate better risk-adjusted returns. And essentially, at Morningstar, we're trying to help investors across the world achieve their financial goals through some of the investment solutions that we have on offer. So with that, I'll sort of stop here, and we can sort of open the floor for questions.
Sure. So Dhaval, I'll request you to stop sharing your screen now.
Sure.
And we've got a lot of questions that have come in, different kind of questions. We'll try to take most of them.
Sure.
We will avoid discussions on specific stocks or specific funds. I will try to take the more, generic knowledge-driven purposes. And if we do discuss any kind of stocks or funds, typically, please take them as more from an educational perspective and not as advice of any kind. So that's the disclaimer from our side.
Sure.
So the first question that I'd like to take up is, you've got a multi-asset fund wherein even your most aggressive fund has some allocation to debt or any other kind of asset class. Okay, so an investor who's looked at the last 20 years or so, every 5 years, if you individually take 5 years, and if you had a portfolio of 100% equities, you wouldn't have been hurt too deeply if you had a long-term horizon. So at this juncture, what is in for investors to look at diversified portfolios or multiple assets in a portfolio per se?
Yeah. So that is what we discussed, right? What we saw is that single asset classes at times you could see, and we've seen, we looked at how Indian equities have performed or global equities have performed standalone basis, right? We saw that in the presentation as well, right? Over longer periods of time, they can generate fairly attractive returns, but the risk is the downside, right? The drawdowns can at times be fairly sharp. So if you are an investor just invested in those individual or single asset classes, you could suffer some of those major drawdowns, right? So therefore, and the recovery periods can be long, and you might, at times it may take 6-7 years, like we saw in 2008, 2009, to just recover your initial investment. So therefore, what we are saying is that multi-asset investing can help you, reduce the risk in your portfolios and try and generate, optimal returns over, longer term periods as well. So I think that's the core message that, we believe in.
Right. So you feel that people who don't want to, who don't want drawdowns in their portfolio for a longer period of time, or in general want to be drawdown averse, even if they have a long-term horizon, should look at multiple assets in the portfolio?
No, I would think most investors would be drawdown averse, right? Which investor will really want to see substantial drawdowns in their portfolios, right? So I would think most investors wouldn't want to do that, right? And the other benefit of multi-asset investing, just to add, is you're able to invest in asset classes that, each asset class may look attractive at various points of time, right? It's difficult to say. For sitting today, for instance, would you say that, Indian equities are looking very attractive? Probably not, right? I mean, we've seen after a strong run that we've seen, probably they're looking, fairly or slightly overvalued in that sense. So are there other asset classes that are looking attractive? With a multi-asset approach, you are able to sort of toggle, through different asset classes, or you're able to sort of, look at different asset classes within a single portfolio. So that's the other benefit of, a multi-asset kind of an approach.
Right. So let's say, so someone has asked this question that, over the last couple of years, that equity has actually done very, very well. Okay. So, what happens if we get to a situation like we were in 2019, after a stellar bull run in 2017, 18, 19 was a year when equities would have not done too well, or certain selected valuations drove for a certain selected stocks, and then it became broad-based in 2021. So how would your portfolio or how would your allocation differ in those times? And how have you, changed your allocations over these 2 years of rally, especially since your fund is also about 2.5 years old?
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. And which is what we saw in one of the slides that I depicted, right? Which is how the Indian equity allocation moved. So when we launched in 2019 or so, we felt Indian equities were looking expensive. So therefore, we were underweight Indian equities, right? And come March, April 2020, when a lot of people were, a bit unsure, right? Because a pandemic, like we say, is like maybe once in a century kind of an event. You don't know what could be the impact of that scenario. But the call that we took at that point of time, and backed it up by action, was the call that we took is that we felt that, the pandemic might have an impact on economic growth and corporate profitability maybe over the next year or two. But when we looked beyond that time horizon, or the time period when we thought of a medium to long-term time horizon, say 3-year, 5-year and beyond, we felt that the pandemic might not have an impact over that kind of a time period. So therefore, when we looked at markets, we felt that markets were looking attractive if you had a longer-term horizon. And that's the reason we added back allocation into, equity allocation into the portfolios during that time period, right? So I think it was important to take that call, because since then we've seen, It's not to say that we anticipated such a strong rally. I don't think
Nobody did.
anticipated that rally. But the point is, the call that we took at that time, we felt valuations were looking attractive. So I think that's the view that we would tend to take. At times, it may be contrarian to markets, or it may be, people may be unsure of what to do. But because we have a strong process at the back end, we are able to take some of these calls, more effectively and execute them as well, quickly in that
Right.
space.
So quick questions, because a lot of people have asked. Would you consider commodities, cryptos, crude oil, other kinds of bullion in the portfolio at any point in time, or ETFs in those formats?
I would rather, I would say that our probably the way we may take exposure to commodities is through, commodity stocks or funds that are investing in these kind of commodities, or companies that are actually, that are involved in those markets or those industries, right? Rather than, say, for instance, globally, we do take positions, say, in energy stocks, right? If we feel that, energy is looking attractive, we might take exposure that way rather than through the commodity directly, right? Because,
that's much more volatile, yeah.
Yeah, that's much more volatile, and it's very difficult to value, right? To derive a fair value, if you were to try and derive a fair value for gold or for crude, very difficult to do that, right? Rather, we are trying to focus on asset classes where we can derive a fair value and then compare the price to that fair value, right? So those are the asset classes that we will try to sort of look at. So that's how we might take exposure, but not directly to commodities.
Right. So Arpita Hegde makes an observation: active aggressive appears more aggressive than active aggressive plus. So
that's a good observation in the sense that the active aggressive portfolio is 90-10 portfolio, so 90% equity, 10% debt. But out of that 90% in equity, about 65 to 70% would be Indian equity, about 20-25% in international, and the remaining in debt, right? Whereas the aggressive plus is a domestic only portfolio, so it doesn't invest in international equities. It invests about 80% in Indian equities and remaining in debt. So on paper, it seems that the aggressive portfolio, because it's a 90-10 portfolio, is more aggressive as compared to the aggressive plus. But the fact is that because I'm diversifying across domestic and international assets in the aggressive portfolio, the drawdown risk or the volatility might tend to be lower than an 80-20, which is a domestic only kind of portfolio. So on paper, that's what you might see. But in reality, we think the aggressive plus, because it is investing only into domestic equity and fixed income, will tend to be a little more volatile as compared to the aggressive portfolio.
Right. So that brings me to the next question that the gentleman has asked. How do you feel about, do you really feel that the global equities in Indian markets could be decoupled, and are they a natural hedging mechanism?
Yeah. I wouldn't say that they are completely decoupled, right? Which is a theory that was used in 2006-7 and so on, when Indian equities were doing very well, when global markets had started, seeing a correction. So I don't think, any market sort of, or at least India probably is not fully decoupled, but you will see periods when there could be a difference, right? Generally, what we've seen is that when there is a major global event, like the pandemic last year, like the global financial crisis or the tech bubble burst, markets tend to be more closely correlated at that point of time. Vis-a-vis during other periods, there would still be a difference in performance, and which is what we've seen with the numbers as well in other years when, certain markets like 2019 or 2013, when Indian equities underperformed, we saw global markets do well. So I think those correlations differ from time to time, but you can't say that they are completely decoupled or completely coupled across time periods.
Right. So there will be pockets of divergence.
Exactly. There will be exactly. Yeah.
Right. So, another thing that, I put a WhatsApp message pointing out this, that, PMS is essentially a platform for bottoms up stock picking, and you are using the PMS platform to essentially, invest to other funds or mutual funds, use mutual funds. So, what is the positioning there, and how do you see, PMS as an effective mechanism to do, fund picking rather than stock picking, and how have you mastered this over the couple of years or through Morningstar's vintage?
Yeah. No, I think that's a pretty good question, right? Traditionally in India, obviously people have been used to seeing PMSs as being more stock investments, right? The way we are seeing this is that what we are following is more of a multi-manager approach. So rather than concentrating the entire portfolio with a single manager, right, or with a single approach, we are trying to pick, different managers who we feel specialize in different segments of the market. So for instance, I'm investing in large, mid, and small caps, right? So what we are trying to do is trying to identify, best of breed managers that will be able to manage my, the large cap portion of my portfolio. Similarly for mid and small caps, right? So we're trying to pick, the best of breed managers in each of these segments. So therefore, I'm reducing the concentration risk associated with a single strategy, right? I mean, I have nothing against an equity PMS, but then in effect out there, you're looking at one manager, one style, and one strategy, right? Out here, we're looking at different managers with different styles coming together in a portfolio, right? So it can work both ways, but that's how we are constructing our portfolio. Similarly, international markets, again, we are looking at different managers. So that's so what we are trying to do is combine different managers managing different asset classes in a portfolio. And over a period of time, obviously, like we mentioned earlier, Morningstar has tried to build capabilities around, fund research and fund selection as such. So that's an area where we have separate analysts who are tracking, a bunch of funds across different asset classes and providing, both qualitative and quantitative views, on, various asset classes in a sort of, across, baskets of funds as such. So that's what we are trying to do when we are constructing portfolios, is combining our mutual fund research, the forward-looking ratings and the views that we have on funds, and combining it with the asset allocation views that we have.
Right, right. And that's quite a good effort that you've done. So I've got a question from Mr. Madhusudan, and I'm not sure if he means to ask it this way, but what I understand, I'll ask the question from it. So since now that we are in midst of a strong bull run, okay, so it's natural that the equity portion will probably keep increasing as a proportion. What is 70% today will become 72, 75, 80%, maybe in an aggressive kind of a portfolio. So since PMS has that flexibility, will you now, every time beyond a threshold the equity proportion increases, will you initiate an act of rebalancing, or will you let the bull run continue its effect?
Yeah. So I think that's a great question. So the way we think of this is the rebalancing that we do is not automatic. It's not in the sense that, okay, equities have gone up so much, instead of a 90% allocation, now they're at 92%, I need to rebalance. Rather, what we will do is we will reevaluate or relook at our views at that point of time. So sitting today, what is my view on, say, large, mid, and small? What is my view on international equities, right? Do I need to add allocation? Do I need to cut allocation? So just to give an example, very recently, obviously over the last few months, we've seen a sharp correction in Chinese equity markets, right? I mean, and contrary to what's been happening in other markets, obviously we know some of the reasons, regulatory, actions taken by the Chinese government and so on and so forth, right? When we looked at that story, we felt that Chinese equities had started to look attractive because, many of those stocks are down 30, 40, 50%, and so on and so forth. These companies are very large companies with very strong moats, the Alibabas of the world, Tencent. So, globally, we took a call to, add some Chinese equity allocation into the portfolio. So my point is that, we would evaluate each market or each, segment of the market based on its merit at a point of time, and then decide, do I need to cut allocation? Do I need to add allocation at a point of time? So it's not like, sort of an automatic rebalancing that happens, but it is more selective and based on our views at a point of time, at that point of time, the way we are seeing those markets or those asset classes.
Right. Fair point. That's a very interesting conclusion. So another question that I missed because it was asked in the earlier part of the session was, so we recently did a study with our newsletter on lifestyle inflation. Okay. And we used a couple of proxies like movie tickets pricing or coffee or, food restaurant inflation. So the movie pricing, the prices increased at a CAGR of 19% from 2001 to 2018, 17, 18. Okay, so the question that I'm coming to is that with debt returns hardly beating CPI, WPI inflation, you've got a portfolio, you've got balanced portfolios, debt-oriented portfolios that essentially investors would subscribe to beat inflation. So how do you look at the entire, debt investing bit, and how do you look to beat inflation with debt funds, yielding as low as ever, and even global debt, not just Indian debt.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, what is your perspective there?
Yeah, I think that's again a very great, that's a very good point and a great question. I would think, obviously, I like to point out one thing. One is we are investing only into Indian debt, so we aren't investing into global debt. At least in India, the rates are slightly better as compared to many other developed
Right.
markets. But the broader point is that debt plays, to our minds, at least two roles, right? So one is obviously acting as to try and generate slightly better returns. But the other key role we think is acting as a cushion in the portfolio, right? So in times of significant market uncertainty or when valuations are very rich, right, you can move money into debt, which is the same question if you'd asked me, and we had looked at the numbers in say March, April of last year, it was a completely different story, right? When debt had generated double-digit returns and equities were down by
Right.
35-40%. So in other words, debt also plays the role of acting as a cushion in the portfolio. So that's what we continue to monitor from time to time, that should I reduce my allocation to debt and increase that allocation to equity, which is exactly what we did in March, April of last year. When valuations were looking attractive, we reduced the allocation to debt and cash and added back to equities in the portfolios, right? So that's important to keep in mind. And when you talk of, say, the balanced portfolio, which is like a 50-50 portfolio, so that is suggested for investors with a horizon of about 5-6 years or so, right? Somebody with a 5 to 7 year horizon. Now, we believe that if you go with a moderate kind of a risk appetite, right? If with that kind of horizon, if you want to go with a 100% equity portfolio, you run the risk of, significant drawdowns if you're investing at high valuation levels, right? So that's something to keep in mind, that debt helps reduce the downside risk in the portfolio as well, besides generating superior sort of performance as such.
Right. Right. Good point made. So got a question from a gentleman or lady asking, global market performance. Have you considered the depreciation with respect to INR, USD INR?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I mentioned at that point of time, is that we had converted all the returns into rupee
Right.
returns. So all of it was considered, factoring, and that's one of the benefits of investing into global equities, is also that, if one believes, and which is our view, that the Indian rupee might continue to depreciate marginally over a period of time, because inflation being higher in India as compared to, say, at least US economy. So therefore, if the rupee were to depreciate, it would add to your return from sort of global equities as such, as an Indian investor. So it does consider, in short, it does consider the rupee depreciation as well when we are looking at the returns, at least what we saw in the previous slides as such.
Right. So closing remarks, Dhaval, view on the markets and your advice to new investors. We're getting new investors every day.
Yeah.
What is your advice to them? Because you are, you're also taking the role of an asset allocator here. What is your advice to them? And any closing remarks if you wish to make?
Yeah. I think it's I would say some of the most important things is not to make investments purely based on past performance, right? I think that's it's very sort of tempting to do that a certain market or a certain stock or a certain asset class has done very well last 1 to 2 years, and you feel, wow, I should be invested here. I mean, I think that's something that one has to be very, very careful about. I think it's important to maintain discipline, and at least we believe that valuations play a very important role. So one has to be very conscious about the valuations at which one is making investments. And at times we see that where there is a lot of optimism, an asset class where a lot of people are chasing that asset class tends to be get overvalued over a period of time. So it tends to lose its attractiveness because there are too many people chasing that asset class. The price gets driven up in a way. The demand tends to be greater than the supply in a way. That's why the prices tend to get driven up. So be conscious of that as an investor. Follow asset allocation in your portfolio and the approach that you are using to construct your portfolio. And in terms of a market view, at least we think that, of course, Indian equities along with global markets have done very well. We think markets are looking a bit expensive. They are not significantly expensive, because if you expand the time period beyond the last 1 to 2 years, if you look at 5-year returns or 10-year returns, Indian equities are now, the returns have become more normalized. So they are not looking, if you look at 10-year returns from Indian equities, they are in the range of about 12 to 13-14% or so. So they are not significantly overboard. Therefore, we don't think Indian equities are very expensive. They are a tad expensive. So at least from our point of view, we are slightly underweight Indian equities.
Right.
That's what I would sort of say in the closing. And I would probably end with one of the comments that we had on the final slide, which was something that Warren Buffett had to say, that investing is simple but not easy, right? It's to practice it in the right way and the right approach. I think that's the difficult part when it comes to sort of investing as such.
Right. So on that note, investing being simple but not easy, we urge all our investors to stay safe, and we wish the best of the festive season to everybody. Please practice informed investing. Thank you, Dhaval, for being with us today and explaining your philosophy, different kinds of investment styles, different portfolio allocation criterias. And it's really been a good 1 hour today discussing your perspective on the market and how you manage money. Thank you to the audience for being so patient with us. In case if you have any queries, I have posted my email ID. You can get in touch with us. See you. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Good night.